It begins on a highway that stretches into nothing, a ribbon of asphalt glistening under early morning fog. The kind of fog that swallows sound, that muffles movement, that turns the familiar into the unknowable. On March 14, 2008, the Smith family set out on a weekend road trip. David, the father, gripped the steering wheel with quiet focus. Laura, his wife, adjusted the GPS, its screen casting a soft glow across the dashboard. In the back seat, 12-year-old Emma and 9-year-old Ben bickered over the window, their voices rising and falling like the ordinary hum of family life. No one knew it yet, but this ordinary morning would become the last anyone ever saw them. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The car cruised along Highway 76, hugging the curves of the Appalachian foothills. The trees leaned in, dark and silent. A passing truck's headlights reflected in the rearview mirror. Then suddenly, the GPS signal flickered. A faint glitch, nothing more than a pause in the map animation. And then it disappeared. Not just the location on the map, but the family themselves. No calls, no texts, no roadside assistance callouts. Their friends, their neighbors, even the toll booth operator, they saw nothing. The Smiths had vanished as if swallowed by the earth beneath them. The first to notice was the local gas station attendant, who remembered the family buying snacks the day before. He thought nothing of it. No one would, until hours later, when David's boss called to ask why he hadn't arrived at the office for a Monday morning meeting. Laura's sister tried calling the family home. The phone went straight to voicemail. Even the Smith's dog, left in the backyard, pawed at the door as if sensing the absence of its humans. By mid-afternoon, the sheriff's department had been alerted. Patrol cars swept the highway, questioning passing motorists, scanning the fog-enshrouded trees, searching every turnout. Yet the highway remained quiet, the car unaccounted for. Only one clue existed, a GPS ping that ended abruptly at a sharp bend, just outside a curve where no cell towers could reach, as if the world itself had swallowed the signal. 15 years later, that lone ping would resurface, not as an echo, but as a key. Modern technology would allow investigators to map the last known locations of the Smith family, tracing their route through a labyrinth of forgotten back roads, abandoned trailheads, and the edges of private property that no one dared enter. And that trace, faint and flickering, would lead to a discovery no one could have anticipated. For now, though, the morning remained frozen in time. A family of 4 vanished from the world, leaving only the memory of laughter, the hum of an engine, and the cold glow of a dashboard screen. What happened to them? Some believe it was an accident, a wrong turn, an unseen hazard. Others suspect something darker, something that may have been waiting on that road all along. Drop a single word in the comments that comes to mind when you hear this story. Where do you think the Smith family went? Because the answer lies not just in the fog, or the asphalt, or the mountains, but in the hidden tracks they left behind. By the afternoon of March 14, 2008, the small-town sheriff's office was buzzing with concern. Patrol cars combed the surrounding roads, officers scoured rest stops, and search dogs sniffed along the shoulders of the highway. Yet despite every effort, there was no trace of the Smith family. The car, a silver Honda Odyssey, seemed to have evaporated along with its passengers. Detective Claire Henderson, a veteran of 15 years on the force, was assigned to the case. She had seen missing person reports before, some tragic, some hopeful, but something about this disappearance felt different. The family hadn't simply gone off the grid. They had vanished mid-journey. No calls, no sightings, no abandoned belongings, nothing. It was as if the road itself had claimed them. The initial investigation focused on the obvious. Traffic cameras along Highway 76 were reviewed frame by frame. Only the faint reflection of the Odyssey appeared on a single lens, 32 minutes before the family was reported missing. That was it. No tire tracks diverging into a side road, no emergency braking, no witnesses beyond the brief flash of metal in the camera's lens. Sheriff's deputies canvassed nearby homes, asking if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual. A few locals mentioned a strange van parked near the highway the week before, a van with dark-tinted windows and no license plate. But without proof, it remained a rumor. The search area expanded, covering woods, abandoned properties, and forgotten service roads that twisted through the Appalachian foothills. Helicopters swept the terrain from above, their spotlights slicing through the early evening fog. Still nothing. Meanwhile, at home, Laura's parents combed through photographs, cell phone records, and emails, desperate for clues. They found only fragments: a hastily packed lunch for the kids, a receipt from a convenience store, and the GPS printout showing the Odyssey's path until the signal abruptly stopped. That printout became the cornerstone of the case. Every road, every turn, every timestamp was scrutinized. Henderson, looking at the printout, felt a chill. The last recorded point wasn't near any town, gas station, or rest stop. It was on a curve that led into a dense stretch of forest. The GPS signal's disappearance suggested either a mechanical failure or something intentional. Local news picked up the story. Family vanishes without a trace on weekend trip, one headline read. Friends, neighbors, and strangers offered theories ranging from carjacking to abduction, but nothing concrete emerged. Months passed. Search teams returned again and again, covering ground, measuring tracks, listening for echoes in the wilderness. Each sweep yielded only silence. Detective Henderson refused to let the case grow cold. She revisited the GPS data repeatedly, cross-referencing it with satellite imagery, topographic maps, and historical land records. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. Small turnoffs that were not public roads, trails that had long been closed, and areas where cell service was virtually non-existent. It was a map of dead ends, blind spots, and forgotten pathways. Somewhere within that maze, the Smith family remained hidden. Or had they passed through, leaving only the faintest trace of their journey? For 15 years, the case would sit in this liminal space, open but unsolved, haunting the investigators and the family alike. Every so often, a hiker would report seeing a vehicle that matched the Odyssey, or a cabin deep in the woods that seemed to be maintained despite appearing abandoned. But each lead went cold. And then, a decade and a half later, technology caught up with the mystery. GPS archives, once dismissed as insufficient, were revisited using new mapping algorithms. Routes that had been invisible to the human eye began to emerge. Trails that led to dead ends suddenly connected in ways no one had imagined. And one trail, faint but persistent, pointed to a location no one had searched. A place that would change everything investigators thought they knew about the disappearance of the Smith family. It was March 2023 when the investigation, long relegated to cold case files, found a second wind. Technology had changed. Algorithms capable of analyzing old GPS signals with unprecedented precision now allowed the sheriff's office to revisit the Smith family's vanished route. What once had appeared as a dead end, a line fading into forested obscurity, suddenly took on new meaning. Detective Claire Henderson, now heading the cold case unit, leaned over her computer screen. The digital reconstruction of the Odyssey's journey flickered with every timestamp. Patterns that had once seemed random began to align. Subtle deviations from the main highway, a series of small, looping tracks hidden within dense forest, and, most perplexing, an intersection of private land long thought abandoned. It was a location no search party had ever scoured. The unit coordinated with geospatial analysts, overlaying historical satellite imagery with a reconstructed GPS trail. They found it, a small clearing concealed from the main road by thick oaks and underbrush. On the maps, it appeared as if nothing had ever touched the soil there. But the GPS data suggested otherwise. Something or someone had moved deliberately, navigating the narrow, unmarked path. The last coordinate was here, in the heart of that forgotten clearing. Henderson gathered a small team for a reconnaissance mission. As the convoy of unmarked SUVs approached, the forest seemed almost to hold its breath. Branches snapped underfoot. Birds fled from unseen perches. The air was thick, damp with the promise of spring and the lingering scent of decay from years of neglect. Henderson's voice over the radio was calm but taut. We proceed carefully. Minimal disturbance. Eyes open. At the edge of the clearing, something caught the sunlight. A glint of metal, small but deliberate. As they drew closer, the shape resolved. The Odyssey, remarkably intact, hidden beneath decades of overgrowth. The paint had dulled. Moss crawled across its roof. Windows were clouded with grime, but the car's silhouette was unmistakable. For 15 years, it had been sitting here, invisible to the world, holding its secrets in quiet patience. Inside, the discovery deepened. The interior was undisturbed, personal items still in place, scattered in a tableau of a life abruptly paused. Lunchboxes, jackets, a child's backpack, and then, beneath the driver's seat, something even more revealing. A small notebook, water-stained but legible. Page after page documented the journey. The stops, the minor mechanical issues, the GPS waypoints marked by the father, John Smith, with meticulous care. But one entry made Henderson freeze. Coordinates were listed, off-road paths that led to something else, something deliberately concealed. The family hadn't just disappeared. They had been heading somewhere, and they had left instructions only a machine could interpret. Back at headquarters, Henderson ran the coordinates through the modern mapping software. What emerged was a site nobody had considered. A derelict property, off-grid, previously under private ownership that had changed hands multiple times in secrecy. Access routes were few, and the property had long been removed from municipal records. It was as if the family had planned a vanishing act, hiding from the world in a place so obscure, only a digital breadcrumb trail could lead investigators back. The cold case unit now faced a dilemma. What awaited them at the property? Years of assumptions had framed the story as a tragedy of nature or accident, but the GPS trail suggested agency, a deliberate act orchestrated with precision and foresight. Something or someone had orchestrated the disappearance, and the evidence hinted that the family might not have been victims of circumstance alone. As night fell over the sheriff's office, Henderson stared at the coordinates glowing on the screen. The clearing, the hidden property, and the Odyssey had rewritten everything the case file had said. A plan, a pattern, and an intent, all waiting to be uncovered. And as she prepared the team for the expedition at first light, she knew the next hours could finally answer the question that had haunted 15 years. Where had the Smith family gone, and why? The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a gray, fragile glow across the clearing. Detective Claire Henderson's team approached the derelict property with caution. Trees clawed at the edges of the path, their twisted limbs brushing the roofs of their SUVs as if warning them back. The Odyssey, now a silent sentinel in the overgrown lot, stood like a testament to 15 years of secrets. Henderson felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. The property itself was a study in abandonment. Brickwork crumbled where ivy had claimed its territory. Shattered windows reflected pale sunlight, the glass glinting like teeth in the ruins. The main door hung off its hinges, and the smell of damp, rot, and mold seeped out, carrying the weight of years uninhabited. But it wasn't chaos that struck the team. It was the deliberate care that remained, subtle traces that suggested someone had planned for the years of isolation. Inside, the walls told stories of stop time. Furniture lay where it had been left, dust thick on every surface, yet meticulously arranged. A kitchen counter held a set of dishes stacked neatly, as if awaiting the return of hands that would never come. In a small study, Henderson discovered journals and papers, some soaked in moisture, others brittle with age. Maps, detailed sketches, and handwritten notes lined the desk. Every page documented the family's last months on the road, the adjustments to their vehicle, the minor detours, and the safe zones they'd identified. They were not lost. They were hiding, perhaps from someone or something. Then Henderson's eyes caught something else, a series of small storage boxes hidden behind a false panel in the wall. Inside were personal mementos, photos, and letters. A birthday card from 15 years ago, never delivered. A faded photograph of the family standing before the Odyssey on a bright afternoon. Each artifact was perfectly preserved, as if the Smiths had paused life mid-motion and stepped away, leaving clues for someone capable of finding them. The team felt a collective sense of awe and unease. This wasn't a crime of passion or a simple misfortune. It was an act of meticulous foresight. Moving deeper into the property, they found evidence of a second living space, ingeniously concealed. A hidden basement, accessed through a trapdoor beneath the carpet. Henderson descended carefully, the beam of her flashlight cutting through the darkness. In the subterranean room, they discovered makeshift beds, storage for provisions, and a small array of electronics. Old radios, maps of local topography, and most importantly, a laptop that had survived the years. Henderson powered it on. The screen flickered, a digital pulse from the past, revealing encrypted files, GPS logs, and a single video file labeled simply, "If found, play." The room seemed suspended in time. It carried the presence of lives carefully withdrawn from society, yet deliberately leaving breadcrumbs. It was clear the family had orchestrated their own disappearance. But to what end? Were they running from danger? Seeking protection? Or was there something else hidden within these walls? Something that explained why they had disappeared so completely and why no one had ever found them until now. Henderson knew the next step would be pivotal. The video could hold answers, but it could also reveal something the team was not prepared for. 15 years of questions had led them here, and now, the truth waited in the shadows of a hidden room, silent but screaming for discovery. Every heartbeat seemed to echo in the empty house, carrying the weight of a family's choices and the gravity of secrets that had endured for more than a decade. Detective Claire Henderson's fingers trembled slightly as she clicked open the video file. The screen flickered and a grainy image stabilized. A living room, strangely familiar, dimly lit with a single lamp. The family was there: Michael Smith, his wife Lauren, and their two children, Emma and Josh. Time had paused for them in this recording, and the way they moved, ordinary and unremarkable, felt almost haunting. They spoke directly to the camera, though it wasn't meant for anyone outside their circle. Michael began, his voice calm but deliberate, almost rehearsed. "If you're seeing this, we have gone into hiding. We are safe, but the world must not find us. Not yet. Our decisions are not criminal, though they may seem so. There are forces that wish to harm us, and we had no choice but to disappear." Lauren added, "We love our friends, our neighbors, our community. We leave these messages to explain only in part. The rest, you may not understand for years, perhaps never, but know that every step we took was to protect our children." The children were quiet, their eyes wide, occasionally glancing at their parents. Emma waved shyly at the camera. Josh stared curiously, holding a small toy. Henderson's stomach tightened. This was not the frantic chaos of a typical missing family case. This was deliberate, planned, methodical. They had vanished willingly, but with a purpose that remained obscured. The video shifted. Maps and diagrams appeared on the screen, overlaid with GPS coordinates. Henderson recognized some locations: remote areas of the countryside, abandoned cabins, and untraceable service roads. The family had traced a labyrinthine path through Manchester and beyond, leaving behind breadcrumbs only they could follow. But there was more: a series of warning messages about people who had tried to track them, threats intercepted long before anyone noticed. Whoever they were, the Smiths had anticipated danger, predicted pursuit, and stayed 2 steps ahead for 15 years. Then the camera lingered on a small black notebook held tightly by Michael. Page after page detailed encounters, sightings, and attempts by unknown parties to follow them. Names were redacted, dates marked with care. A low hum of tension filled the recording, and Henderson could feel it pressing through the screen. The family had created a living archive of survival, a manual for vanishing in plain sight, meticulously documenting every risk. Suddenly, the video cut to a close-up of a key. A simple brass key, attached to a worn leather fob. Michael's voice grew firmer. "This key opens the next chapter. Where it leads is not known to you. It is a place of final safety and perhaps of revelation. Only someone trusted may follow it. You are the closest, but understand, the path is not without danger. Do not underestimate it. Henderson leaned closer, her pulse quickening. The family had left a literal trail, a tangible artifact, but with it came questions she couldn't ignore. Who exactly were they hiding from? How had they sustained themselves for so long without detection? And why now, after 15 years, did they leave these instructions behind, seemingly inviting discovery? As the video ended, the screen went black, leaving only a lingering sense of unease. Henderson realized the case was no longer about a missing family. It was about uncovering a truth hidden in plain sight, orchestrated by people who had mastered the art of disappearance. The clock was ticking, and the path forward was obscured, fraught with risks that even 15 years of preparation might not have accounted for. The next step would take Henderson and her team deeper into uncharted territory, both physically and psychologically. The GPS coordinates were not just a clue. They were a challenge, a doorway into a story the world had almost forgotten. The morning was gray and cold as Detective Claire Henderson and her team drove out of Manchester. GPS coordinates loaded in maps spread across the dashboard. The city, still stirring with its usual Monday traffic, faded behind them as they entered rolling hills and narrow country roads, the landscape gradually losing its sense of familiarity. Each bend in the road, each overgrown hedgerow, felt like stepping into a place that time had left behind, a place where the ordinary rules no longer applied. The first coordinate led them to an abandoned farmstead. Windows were boarded up, the barn sagging under decades of neglect. Henderson parked cautiously at the edge of a gravel path, her eyes scanning for any sign that someone, or something, was watching. She thought of the video again, the calm, deliberate demeanor of Michael Smith as he instructed viewers on the key and the path forward. This was no ordinary missing family. Every step they had left behind was intentional, calculated to manipulate perception and evade capture. Her partner, Detective Sergeant Malik, crouched near a rusted gate, brushing aside cobwebs and dead leaves. Nothing visible, he murmured, voice low. But it's all too clean. No tracks, no signs of life, but the structure looks almost prepared. Henderson nodded, sensing the subtle tension that hung over the team. The Smiths had built layers of deception. They weren't just hiding. They were orchestrating a labyrinth of misdirection. Inside the farmhouse, the air was thick with dust, the scent of old wood and mildew overpowering. Henderson ran a flashlight across the walls, revealing faded wallpaper, a collapsed ceiling in the kitchen, and a staircase leading to the upper floor. At the top of the stairs, a small room awaited, locked, simple, and carefully maintained. She knelt to examine the door. The brass key from the video, now in her possession, fit perfectly. The click of the lock echoed unervingly in the empty house. Henderson pushed the door open. Inside, the room was surprisingly intact. A simple cot, a wooden dresser, and a desk covered in notebooks and photographs filled the space. Henderson's eyes caught a line of sight along the desk. Maps annotated with additional coordinates, diagrams of pathways through dense woods, and what appeared to be a schedule spanning several months. The Smiths had anticipated every step of this search. Every dead end, every misstep by an investigator had been considered. Malik examined a photograph pinned to the wall, a grainy image of the family standing at the edge of a lake, trees behind them, faces calm and serene. It was as if the camera had captured not just a moment, but an entire philosophy of existence, vanishing not out of fear, but as a deliberate act of self-preservation. Henderson felt a shiver run down her spine. This wasn't just a missing family. This was a masterclass in disappearing, an intricate puzzle designed to confound the world. She traced her finger along one of the maps, noting a location marked with a small red deep within a forest reserve several miles away. This was where the next coordinate led. The GPS was precise, unyielding, almost taunting. Henderson realized that what awaited them was not a simple clearing or an abandoned cabin. It would be a place designed to test their resolve, to challenge their assumptions about what the Smiths were capable of. As the team loaded back into the car, The clouds overhead thickened, casting long shadows across the road ahead. Henderson tightened her grip on the steering wheel. The search had become more than a physical journey. It was a psychological descent into a meticulously constructed maze. Every turn, every rustling branch, every shadow could conceal a clue or a trap. The coordinates were not just a trail, they were a gateway. And what lay at the end of this path could change everything Henderson thought she knew about disappearance, survival, and the family who had outsmarted the world for 15 long years. The road narrowed, swallowed by dense oak and ash trees whose branches knotted together above like skeletal fingers. Detective Henderson slowed the car, headlights cutting thin beams through the morning fog. Each mile deeper into the forest heightened the feeling that they were entering a space untouched by time. The GPS coordinates were exact, but the forest seemed to resist precision. Roots twisted across the path, fallen logs blocked the road, and the wind whispered through the leaves with an eerie, human cadence. At last, the red dot led them to a small clearing. Henderson stepped out, crunching over dead leaves, eyes scanning the perimeter. There it was, a structure almost invisible against the backdrop of moss-covered rocks and tangled undergrowth. At first glance, it looked like a simple shed, the kind used by hunters or forestry workers. But the closer she approached, the more she realized it was anything but ordinary. The shed's exterior was camouflaged with panels of bark and branches, windows boarded with hand-cut planks that fit together with deliberate precision. Henderson crouched to inspect the lock, a custom mechanism that had no keyhole, no visible hinge. Only by carefully lifting a hidden latch did the door creak open, revealing darkness within. Inside, the space unfolded in layers, a labyrinthine sanctuary of hidden rooms and clever compartments. The air smelled faintly of pine and earth, but beneath it lingered a faint metallic tang. Henderson swept her flashlight across the walls. There were shelves lined with jars, notebooks, and meticulously labeled containers. Each object seemed ordinary until she noticed subtle irregularities. Diagrams of the house they had once lived in, sketches of the car's trunk, even notes referencing investigators who had followed their trail over the years. It was a timeline, a record of movement and observation spanning 15 years. The Smiths had been documenting every step, every misdirection, every false lead, as if daring the world to catch them. And then Henderson spotted the unmistakable evidence that had brought them here, the trunk. At first, it looked like an old metal chest, unremarkable and unassuming. But the scratches on the surface, the faint imprint of initials, told a different story. Henderson's pulse quickened as she knelt beside it. This was the same trunk Michael Smith had referred to in the video, the one that held the key to understanding the family's vanishing act. Carefully, she unlatched it, the metal groaning under the strain of disuse. Inside, a soft cloth covered several objects, and when Henderson lifted it, the contents revealed themselves in the dim flashlight beam. Photographs, personal letters, and small belongings of each family member, preserved as if waiting for discovery. A journal lay on top, its pages yellowed but intact. The handwriting was precise, deliberate, the words forming a narrative that chronicled not just a disappearance, but a life lived in deliberate isolation. Henderson felt the weight of the realization settle on her shoulders. This was more than a missing persons case. It was a story of control, foresight, and meticulous planning. The family had not vanished randomly. Every step, every choice, every hidden compartment had been part of a larger design to remain unseen, to escape not only the eyes of law enforcement, but the assumptions of the world. And yet, as she examined the photographs, a sense of unease crept in. In several images, the family was shown in locations that defied reason, places that should have been inaccessible, and yet they had been there, documented, alive, moving with intention. This wasn't just a hidden refuge. It was a meticulously curated world, a private existence constructed behind layers of forest and secrecy, accessible only to those who knew the exact path. Henderson looked around the clearing, the fog thickening, muting sound and depth. The forest had concealed them for 15 years, and now it revealed them on its own terms. Every clue, every artifact, every map led to this moment. The family was here, but what they had done to remain invisible, and what they were prepared to do to stay that way, was only beginning to make sense. The detective realized that this case, already extraordinary, was far from over. The family's choices, their meticulous planning, and the secrets in the trunk promised revelations that would challenge everything Henderson thought she knew about disappearance, identity, and the lengths humans will go to remain hidden. Detective Henderson's flashlight trembled slightly in her hand as she traced the edges of the final compartment. The clearing was silent now, save for the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Every photograph, every letter, every jar of meticulously labeled personal effects pointed to the same conclusion. The Smith family had constructed a life in shadows, entirely on their own terms. And now, for the first time in 15 years, they were about to be confronted with the world they had evaded for so long. The first noise came not from the forest, but from the shed itself, a low, deliberate creak of wood. Henderson froze. The sound repeated, closer this time, as if someone had been standing just beyond the flashlight's reach. She called out softly, "Michael? Sarah? We know you're here. We just want to talk." The silence that followed felt heavier than the fog, pressing in from every side. Then a figure emerged, stepping carefully into the clearing. It was Michael Smith, older than any photograph had suggested, but unmistakably the same man whose meticulous planning had created this labyrinth of secrecy. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned Henderson as if weighing her intentions, measuring her knowledge, and considering the cost of her next move. Behind him, Sarah Smith appeared, her expression unreadable, hands clasped in front of her like a sentinel guarding something precious. "You shouldn't be here," Michael said finally, voice calm but edged with authority. "This place, it's ours. You don't understand why." Henderson kept her hands visible but firm, her voice steady. "I understand more than you think. I've seen everything, the maps, the journals, the evidence in the trunk. We can help you, but we need to understand why you disappeared, why you chose this life." Michael hesitated, then gestured toward the shed. "You think this is a life of hiding. You think it's fear. But it's not. This is control. Freedom from assumptions, from mistakes, from being watched. We didn't vanish because we were afraid. We vanished because the world wasn't ours to live in, not yet." Sarah stepped forward, her voice softer but just as firm. 15 years we observed. We recorded every news report, every investigation, every false lead. We learned patience. We learned how invisible we could become. Her eyes flicked toward the trunk, now open on the ground. "And you found this. But that's just the beginning. It doesn't tell the whole story." Henderson realized the confrontation was not going to yield easy answers. Each artifact in the trunk had been selected, preserved, almost ceremoniously, to control the narrative if discovered. Every photograph, every diary entry, was a testament to deliberate choice, not desperation. And the revelation that followed, Michael motioned toward a hidden panel at the back of the shed, was both astonishing and terrifying. Behind it lay another room, smaller and perfectly concealed. Inside were not just belongings, but evidence of the family's meticulous preparation. Provisions, communication devices, even a partially constructed tunnel that led to an exit Henderson hadn't noticed. They had planned contingencies for every imaginable scenario. The vanishing, it seemed, had been executed with surgical precision. "What you're seeing now," Michael said, "is only the surface. The rest you won't understand unless you've lived it." Henderson felt a chill creep over her. This was no ordinary cold case. 15 years of deliberate invisibility, of calculated movements, had produced a family who had rewritten the rules of disappearance itself. And the truth, she knew, was far from simple. What motivated them? Fear, protection, ideology, or something else entirely? Was a puzzle that would take every ounce of patience and insight to solve. For a moment, All three of them stood in the fog-shrouded clearing, the past and present colliding. Henderson knew that uncovering the Smith secrets would not just solve a case. It would rewrite the understanding of human survival, ingenuity, and the lengths one would go to reclaim a life on their own terms. And as the first rays of sunlight pierced the forest canopy, illuminating the hidden refuge in fragments of gold and shadow, Henderson realized that the story of the Smith family was only just beginning to reveal its most extraordinary truths. The Smith story quickly became a case study in both modern investigation and human resilience. Once the initial shock faded, law enforcement and investigators meticulously documented every detail of the hidden refuge. The forest clearing, the shed, and the secret tunnels were cataloged, preserved for forensic analysis. It was as if the family had left a breadcrumb trail, not to mislead investigators, but to control the narrative of their disappearance, even 15 years later. For Detective Henderson, the case had been a masterclass in patience and intuition. The GPS data had provided a starting point, but it was her understanding of human behavior, her ability to anticipate deliberate deception, that allowed the Smiths' location to be verified and their story brought to light. She reflected on the delicate balance between law enforcement and empathy, the realization that sometimes survival had motivated choices that defied conventional morality. When news of the discovery broke, it sent ripples through both local and national media. Headlines highlighted the astonishing tenacity of the Smiths' disappearance and the sophistication of their long-term planning. Viewers were captivated by the idea that a family could vanish in plain sight, survive undetected for over a decade, and leave a carefully curated trail for those who sought them. Social media exploded with speculation, theories, and admiration for the intelligence and audacity required to remain hidden for so long. For the public, the revelation sparked a conversation about the ethics of disappearance. Was it a crime or a calculated escape? Could the family be judged for a choice made out of necessity and caution rather than malice? Experts in psychology and criminology debated the Smiths' motivations, pointing to a mix of fear, distrust, and a desire to live autonomously. Every interview, every report, underscored the tension between societal norms and individual survival instincts. Henderson, however, focused on the immediate human side of the story, reuniting the Smiths with relatives, neighbors, and old acquaintances revealed a mix of joy, disbelief, and lingering pain. Some family members wept openly at the sight of those they had mourned or presumed lost. Others struggled to reconcile the 15-year gap, realizing that the Smiths' absence had reshaped the lives of everyone left behind. The emotional toll of this revelation was as profound as the legal and procedural implications. Legal proceedings followed, not to punish but to formalize the Smiths' reintegration into society. Authorities documented their survival strategies, ensuring that their knowledge could be used for future missing person cases. The GPS data, the journals, and the physical layout of their hidden refuge became educational tools, highlighting the intersection of technology, psychology, and human ingenuity. And yet, as the media frenzy died down and the world moved on, the deeper story lingered. The narrative of the family who disappeared, survived, and left a trail that challenged everything investigators thought they knew about vanishing. It was a reminder that sometimes truth lies not in the chaos of crime, but in the careful, deliberate choices people make to protect themselves and each other. The Smiths had vanished for 15 years, and when they returned, the story they brought back was not one of shame or regret. It was one of resilience, secrecy, and the undeniable will to survive. This was Trace Crime Files. Subscribe for more stories where truth is stranger than fiction, and justice is never as simple as it seems.